I've always preferred driving at night. There's something peaceful about empty roads that stretch into darkness. The cool breeze drifting through the window, and the hush that settles over the world when most people are asleep. But sometimes, in the dead of night, you stumble across things you were never meant to see. About a month ago, I was heading to a small desert town on business. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a quiet, late-night drive under a black sky scattered with stars. My GPS dropped out somewhere along Highway 19. Right as I was looking for the turnoff to my motel, I slowed down, squinting at the map on my phone, which refused to reload. Up ahead, the road split. The main road curved left, wide and reassuring under the pale glow of the moon. But there was also a narrow dirt track cutting off to the right, barely wide enough for my car, choked with weeds and dry dust. It looked forgotten, the sort of path that might save a few miles or end nowhere at all. I hesitated for a second, the hum of my engine the only sound in the desert night. Then I thought, why not? It might be a shortcut, and I was getting tired, so I turned right, tires crunching over gravel and sand, and headed slowly down that dark, narrow track. Not knowing what lay ahead, I turned right. The dirt road rattled my car, dry weeds scratching at the sides. It felt older than the highway, like no one had used it in years. After about 15 minutes, my headlights picked up something odd ahead, a shallow depression in the ground, surrounded by scattered rocks. I slowed to a crawl. When I got closer, I saw it wasn't just a hole. It was a perfect circle, about 10 feet wide. The ground around it scorched black, as if burned by fire. Strange symbols were scratched into the dirt circles, lines, and crude shapes I didn't recognize. Some of the symbols were half buried in sand, but others looked freshly carved. The hole itself went down only a few feet, but it was eerily dark inside, as though the desert night itself had pooled there. I parked, engine idling, and got out for a closer look. The air smelled faintly of burned wood, mixed with something bitter like iron or old blood. Nearby, I noticed blackened candle stubs and what looked like animal bones, cracked and scorched at the ends. For a moment, I felt like an intruder, like the desert itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to leave. I turned and hurried back to my car, heart pounding harder than it should have. It felt like someone had been there recently, or worse, was still watching me. I got back behind the wheel, forced myself to breathe, and kept driving until the dirt road met the highway again. A few hours later, I finally reached my motel. It was a rundown place, with faded paint and buzzing neon. I checked in, barely listened to the clerk's small talk, and went to my room. But I couldn't sleep. The hole, the burned ground, the symbols, they kept creeping back into my mind. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I propped my phone on the bedside table, let it charge a little, and searched online for anything about ritual sites or strange places along Highway 19. It didn't take long. At first, I found half-baked ghost stories and old forum posts. But buried on the third page, I clicked on an article from a local newspaper archive, dated almost 20 years ago. The headline made my chest tighten. 4 found dead in suspected ritual suicide outside Palmdale. The article described how 4 people, 3 men and a woman, had been discovered by a passing rancher. They'd gathered around a shallow pit, surrounded by symbols burned into the sand, and were found with deep cuts on their bodies. Police believed it was some sort of ritual suicide pact. The sheriff at the time said they'd likely been part of a small cult that met in the desert, away from prying eyes. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. The grainy black and white photo showed the pit. A perfect circle, blackened around the edges, symbols scrawled around it. It was the exact same place I had stumbled across earlier that night. I sat there, staring at the screen, my hand trembling slightly. The article mentioned the bodies had been arranged facing the hole, as if expecting something or someone to come out. Another page, buried in the archive, mentioned that locals claimed to have heard chanting late at night, and sometimes saw flickering lights out in the desert. But the official investigation went nowhere, and the deaths were quietly forgotten. I closed the phone, set it aside, and lay back in the cheap motel bed. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that hole, the burned symbols, and imagined the four of them standing there in the dark, chanting to something unseen, then taking their own lives. For what? What had they been waiting for? The next morning, I thought about driving back to look again, but the thought made me sick. Instead, I drove on to my meeting, tried to act normal, but part of me kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone or something sitting in the back seat. That night, when I lay in bed at home, safe, the questions wouldn't leave me. Who made those fresh symbols? Who lit those new candles? Was it people still following the same ritual, or something darker? And why did I feel, even now, like I'd been noticed? Weeks later, I still dream of the desert, of standing by that hole, the wind cold against my neck, the night stretching forever. And in those dreams, I feel something deep below me, watching from the darkness, waiting patiently. Not a ghost, not a demon, just waiting. I haven't driven that road again, and I never will. Because some wrong turns don't just take you off the map, they take you somewhere you were never meant to go. And if you're unlucky, something there might look back. I'm not sure when it began. Maybe it was that Thursday night. I left work late and glimpsed someone under the flickering lamppost. 2 months ago, I knew for sure. Walking home, I sensed someone across the street, moving when I moved, stopping when I stopped. I couldn't see his face, just a tall, still figure in dark clothes. At home, I tried to forget, but that night, every creak kept me wide awake, heart racing. I barely slept. The next morning, as I sipped my bitter coffee, I tried to remember his face. But it wouldn't come. Just a smear of darkness, like my mind refused to capture it. Over the next week, it became a pattern. He'd appear on my walk home, always on the other side of the street, never too close, just there, watching. Sometimes, he'd pause in a shop window, pretending to look at the display. Other times he'd stand half concealed by a tree, but always, I could feel his eyes on me. I told myself again and again, it was nothing. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe work stress was finally getting to me. But deep down, I knew. One evening, I decided to confront him. I walked faster, cut through an alleyway, and circled back. But by the time I reached the spot where he'd been, he was gone. The street felt emptier than it should. I stood there, panting, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Then it started to get worse. I began to notice things around my apartment. At first, it was small, a faint smell of cigarette smoke in the hallway, even though I always smoked outside. A mud-stained footprint near my doormat, the print larger than my own shoe. Then one evening, I found my front door unlocked. I could have sworn I locked it before leaving that morning. Inside, nothing seemed taken, but something felt off. My papers weren't quite where I'd left them. A mug I hadn't used was sitting in the sink. I stood there in my living room, breathing hard, listening for any sound in the apartment, but it was silent, utterly, terrifyingly silent. I called the police once. A young officer came, polite but skeptical. He glanced around my apartment, made a few notes, and told me to stay vigilant. His tone made it clear he didn't believe a word I said. After he left, I felt even more alone. One morning, I found a note under my door. Just a scrap of paper, folded once. My hands shook as I opened it. All it said was, "I see you." The letters were uneven, scratched in a shaky hand. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every sound felt amplified, the ticking clock, the distant sirens, the hum of my fridge. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, convinced that if I closed my eyes, I'd open them to find him standing over me. A few days later, he changed tactics. He started calling. At first, I'd answer and hear only silence, just the faint hiss of static. The calls always came late, around midnight, when the city had quieted down. One night, I heard breathing on the line. Slow, deliberate breathing. I hung up, hands slick with sweat, my mouth dry as sand. I unplugged my phone after that, but it didn't stop him. Then, the emails began. Anonymous accounts, no subject lines. The first message simply read, "You look tired." The second, "You shouldn't drink so much coffee." Each message proved he was closer than I'd ever feared. He was watching me, not just in the street but through my window, maybe even inside the cafe where I got my morning coffee. I became a shell of myself. At work, my co-workers noticed. I jumped at every sound. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold a pen. I'd glance over my shoulder every few minutes. My boss called me into his office, gently suggesting I take some time off. But what would time off solve? I couldn't escape him. Wherever I went, he'd follow. One night, I saw him closer than ever before. I was coming home late again. The street was empty, the air thick and oppressive, and there he was, standing across from my building. This time, the light hit his face. His eyes were wrong, cold, flat, like glass, no expression, just blank. His mouth twitched, almost like a smirk, though it never fully formed. I froze, my breath caught in my chest, and he raised his hand, just a small wave, as if we were old friends. I ran inside, double-locked the door, and collapsed on the floor. I couldn't breathe. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst. After that, I barely left my apartment. I called in sick. I kept the curtains shut, lights off. But even in the darkness, I felt his presence outside, watching, waiting. One night, unable to bear the silence, I switched on the television for background noise. Hours later, half asleep on the couch, I thought I heard something outside my window, a scrape. I froze, staring at the window, my heart in my throat. Slowly, so slowly, I crawled across the floor, careful not to make a sound. I peeked through the gap in the curtains, and there he was, standing directly across the street, in the exact spot where the lamppost flickered. His head tilted slightly, staring right at my window. He didn't move. He didn't have to. That night, I barely dared to breathe. Every time the lamp flickered, I thought I saw him take a step closer. But when the light came back, he stood perfectly still. I tried to call someone, family, friends, but it felt useless. What could I even say? There's a man outside my window, and he won't leave? Even if they believed me, what could they do? One morning, I found another note under my door. This time, it read, "Why don't you say hello?" The letters were larger, angrier, almost gouged into the paper. That evening, I tried something reckless. I waited by the window, heart racing, hands sweating, and when I saw him across the street, I forced myself to open the window. "What do you want?" I shouted into the night. He didn't answer, but his head tilted further, as if he was curious. Then, slowly, so slowly, he raised one hand and pointed directly at me. I slammed the window shut, heart pounding so hard I could taste bile. I barely slept after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured him, his glassy stare, the twitch of his lips, the way he pointed, like he owned me. One night, I heard a noise inside my apartment, a quiet creak from the hallway. My blood turned to ice. I held my breath, straining to hear. Another creak, closer. I tiptoed to the bedroom door and peeked out. At first, I saw nothing. Then my eyes adjusted, and I saw a shadow move, not outside, but inside. He was in my apartment. I can't describe the terror. My vision blurred, My legs felt like water. I backed away, mouth open but no sound coming out. My back hit the wall. The shadow moved closer, slow, deliberate. I reached for something and to defend myself. My hand closed around the heavy lamp on my bedside table. Just as he stepped into the doorway, I raised the lamp and switched it on. The light caught his face, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. Pale, expressionless, his eyes flat and lifeless, his lips twitching but never smiling, his hair slicked back, clothes simple but clean, and those eyes, empty. He didn't speak. He didn't even blink. He just stood there, staring at me. My arm shook so badly I nearly dropped the lamp. Finally, after what felt like hours, he stepped back into the darkness and disappeared from sight. I locked myself in the bedroom. Every night, I hope he'll vanish, but his silhouette is always there, watching. I don't know what he wants, maybe to keep me trapped in fear. Tonight, as I write this, I hear a creak in the hallway. He's here, and this time, he won't just watch,